My parents and my sister kept calling to ask about the chocolates. So, I casually told them. I had already given the whole box to my little brother and the kids. That's when all three of them lost it. They had sent me an insanely expensive box of handcrafted chocolates for my birthday, the kind that costs more than most people make in a week. It arrived at my apartment in downtown Columbus with a fancy ribbon and a card that said, "Happy birthday. Love, Dad and Evelyn. I'm Kendall Morrison. 35, a forensic accountant. Single, no kids, and I've never trusted gifts from that side of the family. I don't even like chocolate that much. And I definitely didn't want something from them sitting in my kitchen, reminding me of old drama. So that same afternoon, I drove out to Dublin to the house I grew up in, walked straight in, and handed the unopened box to my 12-year-old brother, Brandon, and my sister's little ones, Leighton and Mateo, who were bouncing off the walls like always. These came for me, but you guys will enjoy them more, I said. They ripped it open and started eating right there on the living room floor. I left without taking a single piece. That night, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. First Dad, then Evelyn, then Melissa, all asking the exact same question in shaking voices. Did you eat any of the chocolates? I laughed and said, no. I gave the entire box to Brandon and the kids this afternoon. They loved it. Dead silence. Then all three of them screamed at the exact same time, you did what? I still didn't get it. Not yet. If you've ever gotten a gift from family that made your stomach drop the second you realized what it really was, drop your city in the comments and tell me I'm not the only one. Hit that subscribe button because this one only gets darker from here. I was brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed, when the first call came that same night. Dad's name lit up the screen. I answered while still holding the toothbrush. Kendall, the chocolates we sent today. Did you eat any? His voice was shaking so hard I could barely understand him. I spat toothpaste into the sink, laughing a little. No, that. I told you an hour ago when you asked. I dropped the whole box off at the house this afternoon. Brandon and the kids tore into it right in front of me. Why are you calling again? Dead silence. Then a choked sound, almost like a sob. Before I could ask what was wrong, the line went dead. 10 seconds later, my phone rang again. Evelyn, she didn't even say hello. How much did Brandon eat? Tell me exactly. She was screaming, hysterical. Nothing like the ice-cold woman I knew. Evelyn, calm down. He had at least 5 pieces. The little ones grabbed a bunch, too. What is going on? She made this awful gasping noise and hung up. Third call. Melissa, already crying so hard she could barely speak. Sis, please tell me you're lying. Please say you ate some. Now. My heart was pounding. Melissa. I watched them finish half the box. I didn't touch a single piece. Somebody tell me what the hell is happening. She screamed my name once, and the call cut off. I stood frozen in my bathroom, phone still in my hand, trying to make sense of 3 adults losing their minds over chocolate. Less than 30 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown Columbus number. This is Nationwide Children's Hospital Emergency Department. We have your brother Brandon Morrison and your nephews, Leighton and Mateo Rivera, in critical condition. I don't remember the drive. I only remember running through the ER doors. The automatic whoosh sounding too loud. The antiseptic smell hitting me like a punch. A doctor met me at the triage desk, his face grim under the fluorescent lights. All 3 went into sudden seizures and cardiac arrest within minutes of each other. We've managed to stabilize them, but their hearts stopped twice in the ambulance. Blood panels show a massive spike of a cardiotoxic agent, something fast-acting and deliberate. We're running full tox screens now. I must have swayed because a nurse grabbed my arm and sat me down. My mind raced straight back to the phone calls, to the terror in their voices the second I said the kids had eaten the chocolates. They weren't asking because they were worried I might get sick. They were asking because they were terrified I hadn't. I dropped my head into my hands, the hospital sounds fading to a dull roar. And for the first time that night, the truth slammed into me with sickening clarity. The birthday gift had never been meant to reach tomorrow. The next morning, Brandon opened his eyes, looking like a ghost, his skin pale under the harsh hospital lights. I'd been sitting beside his bed for hours, holding his hand while the machines beeped steady rhythms. The second he focused on me, tears welled up. Kendall. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice raw from the tube they had just pulled out. Sorry for what, buddy? He glanced at the curtain separating him from the little kids, then back at me. Evelyn told me the box was only for you, he said. Don't touch it. Just hand it over and leave the room. I thought she was being weird about calories or something. My blood turned to ice. I leaned closer so the nurses wouldn't hear. Repeat that. He swallowed hard. She made me promise. Said it was a special grown-up treat and the kids weren't allowed. I didn't listen because Leighton and Mateo were right there begging. I kissed his forehead, told him to rest, and walked out of the room on legs that barely worked. Back at my apartment, I tore through every drawer, until I found the fancy gift bag they had used for shipping. The box itself was gone, eaten, but the thick cream-colored tissue paper and gold sticker seal were still crumpled in the bottom. I lifted the paper to my nose. Under the faint cocoa scent was something sharp, metallic, wrong. My forensic training kicked in hard. I sealed everything in a clean evidence bag I kept for work, drove straight to an independent lab I trusted in German Village, and paid triple for same-night screening. While I waited for results, I couldn't sit still. My car seemed to drive itself out to Dublin. The porch light was on, but no one answered the bell. I used the key I still had from years ago and let myself in. Dad sat hunched on the living room couch, elbows on knees, staring at nothing. Evelyn paced the kitchen doorway, phone clutched white-knuckle tight. Melissa stood by the fireplace, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red and swollen. The air felt thick enough to choke on. I didn't bother with greetings. Brandon's awake. He told me everything. Evelyn froze mid-step. Dad's head snapped up. Melissa let out a tiny whimper. I held up my phone, red record dot glowing. Start talking. Evelyn tried the concerned stepmom act first. We're just worried sick about the children. Cut the crap. My voice came out flat, deadly. He said you told him the chocolates were only for me. Why? Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. Evelyn's mask slipped. Her lips curled into something ugly. Because they were meant for you, you selfish little. Evelyn, Dad hissed, finally finding his voice. She ignored him, stepping closer, venom spilling out. You hoard everything. That money from your mother just sits there while we struggle. One hard episode and it all comes to your father. To us. You were supposed to be the only one who ate them. Melissa started sobbing louder. We just wanted Brandon to have the future he deserves. You never share. I let the silence stretch. Let the phone keep recording every word. Dad looked 10 years older, face ashen, unable to meet my eyes. Evelyn realized what she'd said and tried to backtrack, hands fluttering. I didn't mean. You meant every word. I stopped the recording and slipped the phone into my pocket. You just confessed to 3 counts of attempted serious harm, including 2 minors. Congratulations. You're all done. I turned and walked out. The front door closed behind me with a soft, final click. I didn't drive home that night. I just drove through downtown, past the Scioto Mile lights flickering on the river, out to the empty highways, and back again until the sky turned pale gray over the skyline. When the sun finally came up, I walked into the most exclusive salon in Short North and told the stylist, "Make me look like the kind of woman who never loses." 4 hours later, my hair was a sharp chestnut bob that framed my face like armor. My wardrobe was replaced with tailored black blazers, silk blouses, heels that clicked with purpose. The mirror showed someone new, someone they would never see coming. First stop after that, Gregory Lawson's office on East Gay Street. I'd worked cases with him before. He specialized in high-profile attempted harm and financial crimes. I laid the phone recording on his desk, played it once, and watched his eyebrows climb. He didn't waste time on shock. I'll have a search warrant for the Dublin house and the remaining packaging by noon, he said, already dialing the prosecutor he golfed with. We'll pull every financial record your father and Evelyn ever touched, and we need to lock down your assets today. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I sat in front of a trust attorney on Broad Street and signed papers moving every dollar of the $1.9 million into an irrevocable trust. The money my real mother had left me was now untouchable. Beneficiary changed to A. Charity and Brandon, trigger. Clauses that activated the moment anyone contested it. They would never see a cent. Gregory called while I was still in the attorney's office. Warrants signed. Police are at the house now. They found the original shipping receipt and an empty container matching the tissue paper you dropped at the lab. It's enough for emergency protective orders. He paused. And Kendall, child services just placed Brandon under temporary emergency custody because of the active investigation. You're the only relative without a conflict. File for guardianship and he's yours tonight. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just felt something cold and final settle in my chest. That same week, on a gray afternoon with sleet tapping the windows, I pulled up to Nationwide Children's discharge entrance. Brandon walked out, leaning on a nurse, still pale, for bruise on his arm, backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked smaller than 12. He stopped when he saw me, eyes wide at the new hair, the new clothes, the new version of his sister standing there with keys in her hand. You came? He whispered. Of course I did. I opened the passenger door of my car. Get in. You're coming home with me. He hesitated only a second before climbing in, pulling the door shut like he was afraid someone might try to stop him. As I pulled away from the curb, he stared out the window at the hospital shrinking behind us, then turned to me with the smallest, bravest smile I'd ever seen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was the one in the driver's seat. Brandon curled into the corner of my gray sectional the first 3 days, knees pulled to his chest, hoodie hood up, eyes fixed on nothing. He barely ate. He barely spoke. He just existed in that small, silent ball. Like the apartment might swallow him if he moved. I gave him space. I left the TV on low, ordered whatever food he used to love, and went to work during the day so he wouldn't feel watched. At night, I sat on the opposite couch with my laptop, pretending to answer emails while actually watching him breathe. On the 4th morning, he wandered into the kitchen while I was cracking eggs into a pan. He stood in the doorway, twisting the drawstring of his hoodie until the plastic tip snapped off and pinged across the tile. "Evelyn used to say it right to my face," he said, his voice rough from disuse. I turned the burner down and waited. She'd sit me on the counter after school and tell me that once you weren't around anymore, we'd finally have enough money. That your mom's savings were supposed to be for the family, not locked up with you. She said you were stealing my future. He looked at the floor. I thought she was just mad. I didn't know she meant it for real. I slid the eggs onto 2 plates and pushed one toward him. He picked at it, then kept talking, words spilling faster the longer I stayed quiet. Melissa would laugh and add that private school tuition was already set aside. They were just waiting for the paperwork. Dad never told them to stop. He'd just stare at his phone and pretend he didn't hear. Brandon thought it was a running joke until the day Evelyn handed him the sealed box and said, "Whatever you do, don't open this yourself. It's only for Kendall." My phone had been blowing up the entire time. Melissa, her first 20 messages were pure venom. "You have no right keeping my little brother hostage. He's scared and he needs his mom. You're going to pay for this." Then the tone flipped. "He's asking for me every night. We can work this out as a family. Please, just let me talk to him." I read everyone and never replied. Not a single word. Then Victor Chen's report landed in my inbox while I was on a conference call downtown. I opened it in the restroom stall so no one would see my face. Page after page of Evelyn's secret gambling life, offshore sportsbooks, crypto betting apps, payday loans at 400% interest, cash advances taken out the same week she mailed the birthday package. Total debt, $380,000 and climbing. Some accounts were joint with Dad. Others were hidden under Melissa's name. For emergencies. I forwarded the entire file to the prosecutor with a one-line note. Motive just got a lot clearer. That same evening, my doorbell camera caught Melissa charging up the steps of my building like a storm. She hammered on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The super threatened to call the cops. I buzzed her in. She burst into the living room, hair wild, mascara already streaking. Brandon was on the floor playing a racing game. He froze when he saw her. "Get your things," she ordered, voice cracking. "You're coming home right now." He dropped the controller and backed toward me. I stepped between them. "He's not going anywhere." She laughed, high and broken. "You think a piece of paper makes you his mother? He's my blood." "Half," I corrected, calm and cold. "And right now the state disagrees with you." Melissa lunged past me, reaching for Brandon's arm. He flinched away so hard he hit the coffee table. I caught her wrist. "Touch him and I call security." She yanked free, eyes blazing. "You've always taken everything first. Mom's money. Now my brother." I pulled out my phone, opened the audio app, and hit play. Evelyn's voice filled the room. Clear as the day it was recorded, because they were meant for you. One hard episode and it all comes to your father. Melissa's own voice followed. Whining about tuition and new cars and how unfair it was that I had everything. When it ended, the apartment was dead silent except for her ragged breathing. She dropped to her knees on my hardwood floor, hands clawing at the air. "I didn't want the kids hurt. I swear. I thought you'd eat them alone. Please, Kendall. He's all I have left." Brandon stepped forward, stood right beside me, and looked down at her. "You stopped being my sister the day you helped try to kill her." Melissa sobbed harder, face crumpling. I handed her the freshly filed civil suit. Gregory had delivered that morning, emotional distress, medical expenses for 3 minors, punitive damages in the high 6 figures. "Take this to whatever lawyer you can still afford," I said. "And don't come back." She stumbled out, clutching the papers, still crying, the door slamming behind her like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Brandon turned to me, eyes shining but steady. "Thank you," he whispered. I pulled him into a hug that I didn't let go of for a long time. That night, he fell asleep on the couch with the controller still in his hand, the first peaceful sleep he'd had since the hospital. I sat in the dark, watching the city lights flicker outside the window, and knew without question that the real fight was about to begin. But at least now we were fighting it together. 8 months after the indictment, we walked through the heavy doors of the Franklin County courthouse on a morning so cold the breath hung in front of us like smoke. The trial lasted 3 full weeks. Brandon and I took the same seats every single day, second row, right side. Him in the same navy blazer that swallowed his shoulders. Me in charcoal suits sharp enough to cut glass. Reporters crowded the back, pens scratching, phones banned but whispers constant. Gregory started with the science. The state toxicologist, Dr. Patel, stood at the projector and walked the jury through chromatographs and blood panels. He pointed to the unmistakable spike of a synthetic cardiotoxin, the same compound, recovered from the tissue paper and from 3 small bodies. He explained in calm, clinical detail how it forces potassium channels wide open, how a child's heart can flatline in under 8 minutes, how an adult dose would have been more than enough for me. Then came the recording. The courtroom speaker crackled to life. Evelyn's voice filled every corner, cold, precise, spelling out exactly how my sudden heart episode would look natural. Melissa's panicked justification followed. Dad's ragged breathing in the background was louder than any words he never managed to say. A juror in the front row visibly flinched when Evelyn laughed. About the money finally coming to the right people. Victor Chen took the stand next. He projected Evelyn's betting history across the giant screen, offshore sportsbooks, crypto wallets, cash advances at 400% interest. $380,000 gone in 24 months. The final transfer, the exact amount for a private middle school tuition, happened 3 days before my birthday. Brandon went last. He walked to the witness box, gripping the rail so hard his knuckles went white. The bailiff swore him in. He looked straight at the defense table, at the 3 people who used to be his entire world, and started talking. He told them how Evelyn would sit him on the kitchen counter and whisper that I was selfish for keeping Mom's money locked away. How Melissa would nod along and say private school was waiting the moment I was out of the picture. How Dad never once told them to stop. How the night before my birthday, Evelyn handed him the sealed box and said, "Give this only to Kendall. Don't you dare open it." He told the jury he thought it was a joke until the hospital. His voice stayed steady the whole time. When the prosecutor asked why he was testifying against his own parents, he looked at me for the first time since entering the box and said, "Because my sister is the only one who ever chose me." The defense tried everything. Dad's attorney painted him as a broken man controlled by a domineering wife. Evelyn took the stand in a modest gray dress and claimed the recording was taken out of context, that she was just venting frustration. Melissa cried from the moment she sat down, mascara running, begging the jury to think of her babies. She said she only went along because Evelyn threatened to throw her and the kids out if she didn't. The jury came back in 4 hours and 12 minutes. Guilty on every single charge. The judge adjusted his glasses and didn't raise his voice once. Richard Morrison, 10 years in state prison for conspiracy and reckless endangerment of minors. Evelyn Morrison, 15 years as the primary planner, plus aggravated financial fraud. Melissa Morrison Rivera, 12 years for active participation and 3 counts of child endangerment. Then the custody portion. The judge turned to Brandon. "Young man, you've heard everything. Do you understand what permanent guardianship means?" Brandon stood without waiting for permission. "Yes, sir. It means I get to stay with Kendall." The judge nodded once. "So ordered." Permanent guardianship awarded to Kendall Morrison effective immediately. All parental rights terminated. Dad wouldn't look up from the table. Evelyn's face twisted into pure rage before the deputies cuffed her. Melissa reached across the railing toward Brandon, fingers clawing the air, mouthing his name over and over. He didn't move. He just took my hand and held it tight. We left through a side exit while reporters shouted questions at Gregory. Snow had started falling in thick, silent flakes, covering the courthouse steps like someone had hit mute on the entire world. In the parking garage, Brandon finally let go of my hand, leaned against the car, and started shaking. Not crying, just shaking. I wrapped my arms around him until it stopped. When we pulled out onto High Street, he rolled the window down an inch, let the cold air hit his face, and said the first full sentence he'd spoken in weeks that wasn't about court. "I'm free." I kept my eyes on the road, snowflakes melting on the windshield, and answered the only way I knew how. "Yeah, kid, we both are." Brandon graduated high school the spring he turned 18, cap and gown too big on his still skinny frame, diploma clutched like it might disappear. I stood in the bleachers at Dublin Kaufman High, clapping until my palms stung, watching the boy who once hid Under my couch now walk across that stage with his head high. That summer, I drove him to Ohio State orientation myself. We filled out every scholarship form together. And when the acceptance letter came, with the full ride package I had quietly set up years earlier through the irrevocable trust, he stared at the paper for a full minute before looking at me with something close to wonder. You did this? Someone had to make sure you got the future they tried to steal, I said. He hugged me so hard my ribs creaked. College changed him in slow, steady waves. Freshman year, he still called me Kendall in public. But by sophomore year, the dorm kids heard him slip and say sis when he thought no one was listening. Junior year, he started introducing me as my guardian to professors, voice proud. Senior year, he just said, this is my family. And left it at that. Dad died in the 4th year of his sentence. The prison called on a Tuesday. Heart attack, sudden, no suffering. I listened to the chaplain's practiced sympathy, thanked him, and hung up. I told Brandon over dinner. He put his fork down, stared at his plate for a long time, then asked if we had to go to the funeral. We don't have to do anything, I said. We didn't. Evelyn and Melissa were still inside, sentences ticking down one gray day at a time. Letters came first, angry, then pleading, then just pitiful. I never opened a single one. I had them forwarded straight to Gregory's office for the file marked evidence if needed. The return address alone was enough to keep the no-contact order ironclad. One night during finals week senior year, Brandon came home from the library later than usual, dropped his backpack, and stood in the kitchen doorway twisting the strap exactly like he used to twist his hoodie string when he was 12. Do you hate them? He asked, voice low. I was chopping vegetables for stir-fry, knife moving steady. I thought about it. Really thought about it while the blade thumped against the cutting board. No, I said finally. Hate takes energy. I don't give them that anymore. He nodded slowly, digesting. I just don't consider them family, I added. They stopped being that the day they decided my death was cheaper than asking for help. He crossed the room and hugged me from behind, chin on my shoulder like he used to do when he was small enough to reach. You're my family, he said simply. I set the knife down and turned to hug him back. Yeah, kid. And you're mine. He graduated summa cum laude in computer engineering the following May. I sat in the stands again, this time in the family section, watching him cross the stage in Ohio State scarlet. The trust fund I'd grown for him now officially his. At 22, every penny, protected from anyone who might still try to touch it. After the ceremony, we walked across the oval. Diploma in one hand, my arm around his shoulders with the other. He looked at the diploma, then at me, and grinned. The first completely unguarded grin I'd seen since he was 10. What now? He asked. Now you build whatever life you want, I told him. And I get to watch. He laughed, the sound bright against the spring air. And for the first time in a decade, I felt something settle in my chest that had nothing to do with anger or fear. It felt like peace. 10 years have passed since the judge's gavel fell. Brandon is 22 now, senior year in computer engineering at Ohio State, living in an off-campus apartment. I helped him pick near the Olentangy River Trail so he can run every morning. Like he's out running ghosts that don't chase him anymore. I'm 45. Director of Forensic Accounting at the biggest firm in the state, corner office on the 32nd floor of the Levesque Tower, view stretching all the way to the Scioto. I bought a new condo in the Arena District last year. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors. No trace of the past except one framed photo of Brandon and me on graduation day. I never went back to Dublin. The house was sold at sheriff's auction to cover restitution. I didn't attend. I didn't need to watch strangers carry out furniture that held nothing but bad memories. Evelyn is still at Dayton Correctional. 8 years left unless parole boards suddenly grow hearts. Melissa got out after 9 for good behavior. Moved to some nowhere town near Zanesville, works nights at a gas station. I know because the private investigator I keep on retainer sends quarterly updates. I never ask for and never read past the first line. I have never visited. I have never accepted a collect call. I have never opened a single letter. Brandon asked once, senior year of high school, if I wanted to be in the room when Dad was buried in the prison cemetery. I told him no. He nodded and never brought it up again. People sometimes ask how I can be so cold. They don't understand that cold isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of self-preservation. I spent 35 years bending, giving, excusing, shrinking so they could feel taller. The moment I stopped, they tried to kill me for the space I finally took up. I didn't forgive them because forgiveness requires aversion of them that never existed. I didn't hate them because hate would mean they still owned real estate in my head. I simply removed them the way you remove a tumor, completely, Permanently, without sentiment. Brandon graduated with honors last May. We celebrated with steak at the top. Just the two of us, city lights glittering below. He raised his glass and said, "To the only real parent I ever had." I clinked mine against his and answered, "To the brother who chose to become family when blood failed us both." That night, he asked if I ever regretted any of it. I looked out over Columbus, the place that watched me break and rebuild, and told him the truth. I regret staying quiet for 35 years. I regret teaching you by example that love means accepting poison with a smile. I don't regret cutting them out. I regret it took almost dying to do it. He nodded, eyes older than 22 should allow. "I get it now," he said. "Family isn't who you're born to. It's who you'd bleed for, and who'd bleed for you." I gave Brandon a real home. I gave him therapy, boundaries, college, safety. The kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or receipts. The rest of them made their choices. They chose money over a daughter, greed over a sister, convenience over a son's life. I chose to live. And every morning, when I walk out onto my balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over a city that belongs to me now, I know one thing with absolute certainty. I gave Brandon a real home. The others, they chose their path, and I am no longer on it.